Near the start of this book, I admitted that its completion was several years late because a university administrator using a persuasive tactic got me to agree to teach an MBA course at his university. While I was there on a leave of absence to write the book, the decision derailed those writing plans during my stay at his school. However, I also admitted to seeing certain positive outcomes of the decision, such as having a good story to recent research that wasn't valuable back then. There was another positive as well. I got the opportunity to ask students in the course who had all returned to school after several years in the working world to write an essay describing what they had experienced while being employed in an organization with either an ethical or unethical work climate. Most choose to report on what they would felt and witnessed in an unethical culture, perhaps because those memories were more intense. One student provided an edifying account of a company he had worked for that started out healthy but had since suffered a $1 billion loss. The CEO abused the influence principles on a regular basis. He claimed scarcity when there was abundance. He used his authority to make others act against their better judgment and created examples of social proof that didn't exist. People believed him in the third run, but as the truth leaked out, the company's reputation deteriorated. Few companies are willing to do business with him now. Those that do will only do so on onerous terms. 3 million people in my house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The culture of dishonesty trickled down throughout the organization. The marketing department was coerced to exaggerate the truth. The PR department wrote mostly false press releases, and salespeople coerced customers. Job dissatisfaction and turnover were incredibly high. 12 million people in my house, 13 million people in my house. People were attracted to the company by high salaries, which the CEO saw a justification for treating employees poorly, but left as soon as they could find work elsewhere. Taking a cue from the executives, employees would steal from the company whenever they could, usually via travel and expense reports. 10 million people in my house and one like. Everyone do like. Some would cut side deals with suppliers. When I visited a few months ago, nearly half the staff had left. The morale was lower than ever. Strike three. 9 million people in my house. I am I am strongly inclined to hope so. Of course, whether that hope is ever realized depends on the extent to which leaders accept the financially based argument against duplicity and choose to act accordingly. The Tinker Bell scenario isn't going to apply here unless those leaders set the proper organizational tone. This argument won't take wing and fly just because the rest of us really believe in it. The concurrence of those at the top is required. Fortunately, if they want, they can build and maintain an ethically commendable workplace culture as readily as an ethically objectionable one. What could be done to send senior leaders more eagerly down the virtuous path? For one large group of them, no shift in direction seems necessary. They have already decided on that route and should be admired for following it. But for the nearly half who feel that economic considerations do warrant dishonest conduct, it may be necessary to lay out certain countervailing cost of employee underperformance, turnover, and malfeasance that apply even when the misconduct is not detected by outsiders. 8 million people have in my house again. 3 likes, thank you so much. Who's liking my live? 1. As a set of general recommendations that all commercial organizations might want to adopt, 3 appear worth the effort. Honesty ratings by customers and clients of employees they interact with should be part of the employees' incentive structures. In addition, the ethical reputation of the company as a whole should be measured and included in assessments of yearly performance. Finally, ratings by employees of the firm's ethical orientation should be a component of senior management's and especially the CEO's compensation package. Hello, hello. The effect of these steps would not only incentivize ethical conduct but also bring continuing heightened attention to ethical standards. The consequent focused attention on these matters would justifiably elevate their perceived importance and casual role in organizational affairs. Persuasion after effects. Throughout this book, we have seen that successful persuasion can occur when audience members' attention is channeled temporarily to a psychological concept favorable to a follow on message. However, if persuasion is indeed based on temporarily directed attention, there's an important question all persuaders must confront. When rival communicators or even everyday events divert that attention to some other concept, what can be done to prevent the favorability from evaporating? It's a worthwhile concern as change agents are usually interested in generating more than certain movement, although, as prior chapters attest, time limited shifts can be extraordinarily productive when managed astutely. Nonetheless, our optimal impact, the hope is to have an enduring effect. Two effective strategies are available, each arising from a different approach to social influence, one old school and one new school. Oh my god. Creating lasting change by installing strong commitments. Traditionally, behavioral scientists have offered a straightforward answer to the question of how to make a person's initially affirmative response persist arranges for the individual to make a commitment to that response, usually in the form of an active step. Consider how this recommendation can reduce a costly social problem. Patients who fail to appear for medical and dental appointments are more than an inconvenience. They represent a sizable expense to the healthcare system. A standard practice designed to reduce these no-shows involves calling patients the day before to remind them of the appointment. Sorry. In a study led by my colleague Steve, भाई खुट्टा निभाया था यार. Colleague Steve J. Martin and conducted in various medical clinics. Such efforts reduced failure to appear by 3.5%, but the reminder calls require time and money to deliver and didn't always reach their targets. Compare that to the wisdom of employing a commitment procedure. When making a future appointment after an office visit, we all know what happens. The receptionist writes down the time and date of the next appointment on a card and gives it to patients. If instead the patients are asked to fill in the card, that active step gets them more committed to keeping the appointment. When this costless procedure was tried in the British Medical Clinic study, the subsequent no-show rate dropped by 18%. Although the effect of reducing missed medical appointments is no small thing, an 18% decline could net the equivalent of 180 million per year in the United Kingdom alone. It's possible that prompted behavioral commitments can have a much larger societal impact by influencing political elections in 2008. Zero. Thirdly, before the presidential election between Barack Obama and John McCain, Americans in several states were surveyed online regarding their political attitudes and beliefs. Half saw a small American flag at the top left corner of the survey questionnaire as they began to answer its questions. The other half saw no flag. Exposure to the American flag in this subtle way caused participants to become more favorable to McCain's Republican Party and its politically conservative ideology. Moreover, when participants were resurveyed after the election, the researchers learned that those who had encountered a US flag on the prior questionnaire had voted for McCain at a significantly greater rate than the other participants. Finally, and perhaps most remarkably, a full 8 months after the election, participants who had made contact with their flag during the long past survey were still embracing more Republican Party oriented attitudes, beliefs, and judgments. Could that single exposure really account for such lasting and consequential effects? Results such as these beg for explanations. 2 million people in my house actually because there's more than one process involved. The first is persuasive in character. Background exposure to the American flag put participants in mind of Republican Party thinking. Indeed, a pilot study done by the researchers showed that in 2008 anyway, Americans reliably made that link between the flag and republicanism, just as we have seen previously that a background encounter with French music in a sub disposed people temporarily toward French things, such as French wine, and a background encounter with an image of fluffy clouds on furniture store website made people more disposed temporarily toward soft things, such as comfortable sofas. Such an encounter with the American flag made people temporarily more disposed toward Republican Party candidates and positions. Oh my god. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This. So much for the flag's immediate effects, but how can we explain their surprising persistence? The survey researchers think they know. After coming across the American flag and becoming temporarily more inclined toward republicanism, participants were asked to act on that inclination by registering it in the survey, thereby committing to it to be behaviorally. Their commitment led to an even more committing form of activity when they subsequently voted in the election, which in turn led to a solidified Republican Party orientation when measured 8 months later. This sequence is reminiscent of the outcomes of research examining the effect of a different persuasive experience have moved on a different type of preference for artwork. 2 million people in my house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Kapag favorite artwork. After people read a happy story, their temporary elevated mood caused them to like a painting. But 5 days later, only those who had actively rated it while in that elated state still felt the same way about the painting. Those who had not rated it and therefore had not logged in that evaluation behaviorally saw no special preference for it at all after the happy mood had dissipated. The implication for effective persuasion is plain. Persuasive openers can produce dramatic, immediate shifts in people, but to turn those shifts into durable changes, it's necessary to get commitments to them, usually in the form of related behavior. Not all commitments are equal in this respect, however. The most effective commitments reach into the future by incorporating behaviors that if affect one's personal identity, they do so by ensuring that the commitment is undertaken in an active, effortful, and voluntary fashion. Because each of these elements communicates deep personal performances. For instance, if through someone's persuasive maneuver of showing me images of people standing together, I become temporarily inclined toward an inclusive social policy, say raising the minimum wage for all workers. And I see myself acting on that preference by making a quickly requested financial contribution to the cause. I will become more committed to the idea on the spot. In addition, if the action was both made freely, it was entirely my choice and difficult or costly to perform. The size of my donation was substantial. I am even more likely to view it as indicating what I favor as a person. It's this behaviorally influenced self perception that would anchor and align my later responding on the issue. And it would be so even if the sequence was instigated persuasively by a momentary shift of attention, in this case to the concept of togetherness, creating lasting change by queuing up the cues. Okay, now it's enough. 20 मिनट्समै थाक्दो रहेछ किताब पढाएर होला अलि उयो भयो पेट दुखिरहेछ पेट पनि त्यो हेऱ्यो भने चाहिँ अलिकति माइन्ड डाइभर्ट भइरहेछ किन त्यसरी उतार्नु नपर्यो नि त नि अन्त कता पनि त यता पनि दुखी छ यता पनि दुखे जस्तो भयो अनि मम्मीले फोन गर्नुभएको थियो त अघि अनि हजुर बोल्दै हुनुहुन्थ्यो नि काट्दिएँ ल के गर्दा त पैसा चाहिएको हजुरलाई एउटा माग्नु परेन के भएर सबैलाई के भयो कस्तो के भयो के गरेर एउटा काम सुरु गर्न लाग्यो पैसा के चाहियो भन्ने लाग्यो के तिमी दिनला होइन सोध के गर्न लाग्यो भनेर सोध्न पनि नहुँदा 20 लाख रुपैयाँ अन्त 20 लाख अरे तिम्रो यो चट्टै मिलेको दाम रहेछ नि त्यही पनि रगत आफै भयो अहिले पनि त्यसै अघि उल्टी गरे भए त भन्नु न के हो किन चाहिएको त अनि भन्दिनँ के गर्नलाई काम गर्न आऊ काम के काम गर्नु त नि काम त नि अनि के काम भनिरहेछ गरेपछि भनौँ न पहिला भन अनि भन्दिनँ म 3 लाख पैसा दिने हो भने चाहिँ भन न पहिला सुन भने पैसा दिने हो चाहिँ भन्छु भन्नु न हौ भन्दिनँ हौ भन्नु न भन्दिनँ भन्दिनँ नरिसिटाउने मलाई पक्का लाग्छ बिरामी मान्छेलाई पनि रिस उठ्छ मलाई त हिजोबाट रिस उठेको त्यसै पनि उस भइरहेको छ भन्नु न त्यसै पनि झगडा गर्न मन लागिरहेको छ भन्नु न यसो 1 महिना जति रुएन भने त नि तिमीलाई त कसरी रुम होइन चाहिँ तर मलाई कस्तो भयो भने रिस उठेको हुँदैन उठ्ला जस्तो मुर्सी भइरहेको त्यो अचम्मको मान्छे हन्तन हतन भन्नु न किन चाहिएको र